Hey everybody, Aaron here. Welcome back to another anime review. Today we look at a really old movie called Royal Space Force. Now, there's by the way a longer title to it, but the last part, the Wings of, after that word, I have no idea how to pronounce that whatsoever. Like, there's no way I'm even gonna try. It's such a weird word. But anyways, the Royal Space Force is done by Gainax. Yeah, Gainax. So you know what to expect with that. I mean, right? You think this is 1987, folks. This movie's old. When I said it was old before, I was not kidding. It's a very old movie. This is Gainax at basically their beginnings. And what's interesting about this is that if for a 1987 movie, you have to realize this is phenomenal. If you were to exist back in the 1980s and see a movie like this, an animated film like this, you would be blown away by its gorgeous kind of vistas, the animation, the quality of the animation, etc. In 2017, you still can appreciate the beautiful art and vistas, but you also notice a lot of really kind of interesting design choices and stuff like that because of course limitations. So with this, I'm gonna do a dual review, which as you guys know, if you're new to my channel, you probably don't know this, but if you aren't new to my channel, you understand when I say a dual review. At the end, I'm gonna give it two scores. I'm gonna give it a score as of current, like what it would live up to this time period, and the current score of what it would be back when it came out. Now, some people might say, "Oh, that's kind of a double entendre in a way," or you're being kind of a hypocrite in many ways by that. I'm really not, because by me watching this, I want to appreciate what I'm watching, and I have to go into a mindset where I review it on today's level of animation and anime. But at the same token, I have to also realize that the time period it came out when was decades ago. It wasn't two years ago. It wasn't 10 years ago. This is many years ago. This is more than 30 years ago, and we're looking at something that, hey, listen, it's got some great stuff to it, but there's a lot of design choices that are definitely not going to live up to today's standards. Now, the plot is very interesting in concept. I mean, in execution, even back in 1987, I don't know if it would have been the most well-received thing in the world, but essentially Japan, or a certain kind of alternate version of Japan, will say. I put air quotes on that. You can't see me actually doing that, obviously, but in an alternate version like of Japan, or even Earth, in that matter, there are various things that are happening. The technology that we're getting is very advanced, and we're going to war for every resource we can go to. But the problem is that we haven't done something that already has happened in the original version of Earth, and that is go to space, or even try to go to space. Now, apparently, they have tried with like rockets and stuff to shoot them up into the stratosphere, but have never gotten successful for it. But regardless, what Earth decided to do, or this particular area decided to do, was still have a unit of military that was designated the Royal Space Force. What their concept is supposed to be is they're supposed to be in charge of anything that is to do with space or space battles. Now, ironically enough, that sounds ridiculous for them because there has never been exploration towards space. They've never gone to space before, so why are they even existing? It takes one character, Shiro, who is this young man who calls himself in the very beginning of the movie a very special kid. He feels like he's very weak-minded, etc., but he feels like he was destined for something at least. And it was interesting that he says that because they really show how dumb of a character he is. Like, he is a dumb character. Protagonist-wise, he's very lazy in the beginning. He's very dumb when it comes to like any education in terms of the show. And his character does get bolstered up toward the end, of course, obviously, but it takes this one character to kind of make waves. And that's one thing that I think that's why it's so funny that they give you this foreboding thing at the beginning, which is not foreboding in a bad way, mind you, but it's like leading up to a part where he's going to become a special person in the story. Um, Now, the concept of it is that, of course, the whole movie surrounds with the war and also at the same time his force, which their force feels like rejects from the military, so they don't do anything for the most part of this whole movie. They try to like just exist and kind of just get paid to be there. But at the same time, Shiro's realizing that there's more to him when he meets a young woman who is in charge of this kind of, I want to say, religious sect. I think her name was Nadariko, and her job is essentially, like I said, is just to be there to just hand out pamphlets about how God is there and how God is this and that. And by the way, mind you, this is not a really religious type concept in the movie. It's like an alternate version of God, so don't be too catering to like the concepts it's talking about. Don't be like, oh no, they're what are they talking about? This doesn't exist. It's not really a real religion in the story. It's just using the concept of God. But what was interesting about Space Force, and I did find some of the stuff that was actually pretty cool about it, animation, like I said, even for today's date, is pretty nice. I mean, you could tell that these characters were hand drawn. It's a whole different style from today's current generation of animation. There's some weaker character models, of course, and there's some weaker backgrounds, but for the most part, Gainax, you could tell, was really in their prime when they did this. Like, this is something that they showed, hey, listen, we can do animation really fucking well, and they fully were aware of it when they made this, which is pretty cool to me, I think. In terms of story and anything else in terms of voice acting and stuff like that, that's where the show has issues. Like, another positive is the music. I want to talk about the real fast. The music and the opening and ending song, and also just the OST in general, has some very nice tone setting stuff. It's really, really well done. Now, back to the story, which is, like I said, the weakest part of this, and maybe the voice acting. The voice acting, really fast to explain it, is just old anime dub. It's not really that well done. It's got some actors that you actually might know. Like, for example, Bryan Cranston apparently is one of the voices for one of the characters, which was really interesting to me. But Bryan Cranston used to do a lot of voice acting work for various TV shows and animation, so I'm not really surprised by that back in the day. But what's interesting though is a lot of the voice actresses and actors aren't well known besides that. They're mostly like people that were existent back then and now kind of just disappeared into nothingness in terms of voice acting work. But the story is what I said is probably what takes the biggest hit, because the fact that the story is very boring. That's the easiest way for me to put it. It's a very boring movie. And the problem with that is that it does get more exciting toward the end when you start seeing a lot of the war concepts and the characters having to deal with, people not wanting to go to space and the kind of riots that start building up. That's interesting. But up to that point, it takes a long time to get there. It's a 2-hour movie. And, if you really like space stories, if you're really into those, you'll understand that there is a very boring concept to them. I mean, I love sci-fi films and stuff like that, sci-fi TV shows, but there's always a lot of build-up in them because they have to explore, a lot of the lore and explore a lot of the characters and concepts, etc., the time period stuff. Because of that, though, you're gonna really only see maybe a good 20 minutes of actual action this whole movie, and that's gonna definitely make your mileage with the movie kind of vary. Besides that, though, when it actually does get with its characters, we even have more issues with the characters because, for example, Shiro's character does a lot of stupid shit in this movie. So does Noriko, I'll be honest with you. There's a point, and I'll explain it very simply, where at one point of the story, Shiro is, like, I guess, very frustrated, and he ends up sexually attacking Noriko. And I got very pissed off because I'm like, Shiro, what the hell? Like, Shiro was a cool character for the most part. Up to that point, he was very droll and stupid, but I enjoyed that they were trying to keep him in a kind of realistic setting. But him doing that kind of annoyed the shit out of me just for the fact that it had no purpose or rhyme or reason to it. And then you have the next day where Noriko's like apologizing to him, going, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's okay, Why are you apologizing, Noriko? He just tried to sexually assault you. What are you apologizing for? Like, damn, what? That goes to show you, though, the older style of writing, I think. They definitely left a very bad impression with, like, how those two characters interacted with that sequence. There are also other things, but I'm not going to go into the whole details, but that was, like, the most noticeable one that's really, like, what? Like, you just look at it like you're baffled by it, to be honest with you. But here's the thing, if you were to review this I'm going first with the older score. If you were to review this back in 1987, this would definitely be, I would consider something that would be like an 8.5 out of 10. Maybe, so for my settings, and I realized I should actually be using my settings, not numbers, which is weird. If I had to score this between an A through F, I would have to give it a solid B plus because honestly, this is a movie that was very strong. I can tell that back in its day, it was well received by a lot of reviewers too. I mean, there was a lot of great reviewers. Egan Roper actually gave this a huge rating back in the day too, and there are other reviews that you could see from it way back when. So I mean, it was well received even back then. And I'm not trying to mimic those people. I don't give it as high of a score as they do, mind you, but I can understand quality back then was very different from today's standards. Now, in today's standards, if I was to review this through an A through F, I have to give it a C minus. Because besides the animation being the stellar point of it, like, I mean, the animation still is awesome to behold even now because of the style of the way it was done. The story and quality are very meh. And voice acting wise, both Japanese and English dub is not that great, to be honest with you. So you're not going to get very much from that. But overall, though, I'll tell you right now, if you're a real big fan of Gainax, if you want to see some of their early works, and if you're a big fan of older stuff in general, you really can't go too wrong with this movie. I mean, I would definitely try it out, just see how you think of it. It's something that you'll probably, have issues with. I'm gonna say, I don't want to say it like in a way like don't watch it because that seems like almost unfair to people, but it's definitely one of those movies that maybe by the first 10 minutes of it, you're gonna have an idea of what the movie's gonna do wrong. And if you're okay with it, then you're gonna be able to go through the whole thing. But it took me 2 sittings to watch this movie because it was just very boring. I actually watched this with my dad, and me and him had the same kind of opinion. We both enjoyed the art because my dad comes from an older style of animation, so he understood the art a lot better. And he gave me the same thought, was that he loved animation, and he thought, back then, if this came out when he was a kid, he would be like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. But even for when he was around, and that's then 1987, obviously, he would have thought this was amazing. So, definitely understandable that this has some appeal to people that love older stuff, or if you're from a different generation. If you're from newer generation, understand that, hey, this might not be your cup of tea, to be honest with you. Now, I got this for $3. So realistically, I didn't lose much by watching this. It wasn't a big deal. But I definitely could say that if you have to pay something to buy this, pay something short, like small amount of money. And also, there are a lot of places that this is available online. I'm not saying to use those places, mind you, but there are a lot of places because this is such an old movie that it's kind of hard to kind of keep it regulated by copyright, etc. So you definitely could find it. I mean, I saw YouTube links that say the whole movie's out there. So I mean, it's definitely possible. Anyways, guys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this review. As always, if you do like these reviews, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video. You know the whole nine. As always, until our paths cross again in the next review, have a great day, everyone. God bless you all. Bye bye.